Thanks.
Minutes.
Okay, here, first of all, I want to start by thanking all the disabled people's organisations who have participated in preparing this motion. Their demands are front and centre, which is exactly as it should be. So far, there's no sign of a government counter-motion, so I presume from that means that the government is not going to oppose our motion, will allow it to pass. Before there's uproar and celebration in the gallery, I would just warn that this government has a long and not very proud history of allowing motions to pass and then not doing anything about the things that are passed in the motion. So I would say that if this passes this evening, that is obviously welcome, but it needs to be implemented. There are 6 main demands in this motion. The government has so far fully committed to one, to immediately scrap the Green Paper. That is, of course, welcome. What was proposed was a Tory-style workfare regime reminiscent of the film I, Daniel Blake. I remember when I first raised that with the former Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, he said that I, Daniel Blake was a good movie, but one-sided, and you should watch Benefit Street to see the other side of the story, encapsulating this Tory mindset of deserving, undeserving people with disabilities. The fact that you all came up with such draconian proposals in the first place reveals an awful lot about the attitude to people with disabilities. I unfortunately think that Tory mindset is not gone as a consequence of the decision to scrap the Green Paper. For too long, disabled people have been treated appallingly by the Irish state, committed to institutions, forced to live in poverty and isolation, prevented from participating equally in society and denied fundamental human rights. That has to stop. Disabled people are uniting, are organising to demand their rights. And it is high time that the government and the state started really listening to them, started consulting with them in a meaningful way rather than proposing policies from on high that fail to meet their needs. One would hope that the scrapping of the Green Paper is a step in that direction. Let us see. There will certainly be a push to demand it. That would not have happened without the determined campaign of resistance ever since the Green Paper was first published. The government attempted to ignore that, attempted to push on, but disabled activists did not back down, and in the end, they have won this important victory. That and the massive no vote in the care referendum should put the government and the institutions of the state on notice that ignoring and mistreating people with disabilities and carers will not be possible any longer. The government must start taking meaningful steps towards guaranteeing equal rights for disabled people. Tokenism will not be tolerated. The government is absolutely awash with cash, has more than enough money that should be put where its mouth is. There must be no more striving to support. We need real action and real resources now. We have heard from disabled people's organisations about what kind of system and resources they need. They want universal payments that cover the real costs of having a disability and provide them with reliable income security. No one should have to live in poverty, and certainly not because they have a disability. But poverty and deprivation are what many thousands of people in this country endure on a daily basis. 1 in 5 people who are unable to work due to long-standing health problems live in consistent poverty, and 1 in 2 live in deprivation. That is shameful. Disabled people are twice as likely to be homeless, far less likely to have a job, with the highest rate of unemployment in the EU. It's important to point out that the Irish state is not just kind of failing to meet the needs of people who are disabled. The Irish state is disabling people by failing to put in place the mechanisms to support people. A key mechanism through which this is done is the dehumanising and traumatising system of means tests. It is degrading, it is time-consuming, it wastes resources that should actually be used to help people instead of forcing them to continually prove and reprove that they need assistance. It has no purpose other than a form of state discipline, a way of discouraging people from getting what they are entitled to, humiliating them for having needs and minimising what the state so reluctantly doles out. It situates everyone in need of assistance as a potential welfare cheat, not to be trusted. That's what Leo Varadkar was getting at with his Benefit Street reference. It should have no place anywhere in our social welfare system, and it must be abolished. We in People Before Profit stand for universal benefits and universal public services for all. For carers, this must provide a real living wage that recognises the essential work that they do day in, day out. Globally, capitalism saves $11 trillion a year from unpaid care work and many trillions more by systematically underpaying paid care workers, most of whom are women. We need a massive expansion of personal assistance hours to enable people to participate fully in society, and we also need to ensure that personal assistants and all other care workers get the pay and conditions that they deserve. We cannot continue with a society that gives golden handshakes to bankers and executives, but the cold shoulder to disabled people and carers. It's welcome that Simon Harris has finally committed to ratifying the optional protocol to the UN CRPD this year. However, we still have no date as to when this will happen. Time is ticking on this government, and we need it to ratify the protocol now. The new Taoiseach has also said that the backlog in assessments of needs has to be unblocked. But we haven't seen any details as to how this will happen. Almost 9,000 children are overdue for assessment of needs. Over 17,000 are waiting for first contact with the CDNT, a Children's Disability Network team. I have figures which an activist got from extensive FOIs, which indicate that almost 9,000 children have been waiting almost 12 months for those initial contacts. And those FOI reveal, one, mistakes right across the board in terms of the figures, discrepancies in the figures, which means there's a real problem in terms of planning if there's all these discrepancies. But it also reveals the cause of these problems, of the massive delay. The vacancy rates across the board in terms of therapists and so on is through the roof. 40% for occupational therapists, 70% for dietitians, 30% for family support workers, 30% for care assistants, 70% for play therapists. I could go on and list these. And so the result is that even when children get an assessment of needs, over 110,000 are on a waiting list for treatment. The Ombudsman for Children has accused the state of a profound violation of children's rights in relation to disability care. The report, Nowhere to Turn, aptly describes how children with complex disabilities are left in inappropriate settings for months due to the failure of the state to provide them with home supports. Parents are forced to fight for services for their children, which are considered basic human rights in most European countries. The truth is that this state has never cherished all of the children of the nation equally, and this government is continuing that disgraceful tradition of discrimination and neglect. Rather than speculating €100 billion in public money on international markets, as they're planning to do with the Future Ireland Fund, they should be invested in public services and a better quality of life for all who live here right now. From assessment of needs to financial and respite support to parents and carers, raising pay and conditions for workers in the disability sector, all of the arms of the state need to work together and take responsibility instead of passing the buck between them and outsourcing services to underfunded NGOs reliant on charitable fundraising. Final point is our final demand in the motion for a constitutional amendment to assert equality for disabled people and guarantee rights for all. That's what we need.